Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240. We have a story here today, and we have in studio Asa Buck, Sheriff Asa Buck of Carteret County, and we have a mother of a former student in Onlsow County who, well, I'm going to give the mother an opportunity to, and we're not going to refer to names right now for a variety of reasons. Most importantly, because there are ongoing cases involved in this, and also just a situation right now that we do not want to get into too many details. I will say that I've elicited from our guest the opportunity as this case unravels, or if you will, begins to shape up, we'll get more details and do an ongoing series on this, because this is one that is just an example of what we've been talking about for quite some time. We also have joining us this afternoon Don Mrdanovich, and he's only going to be with us for a few minutes, so I'm going to leap ahead on some of these issues. But Don, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Lockwood.
Pleasure as always. Asa, likewise, thank you for being here.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
And to Mom, thank you for being here as well.
Thank you.
Mom, and that's how we're going to refer to you today.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Let's talk very quickly, your son's situation, how did it come about, and where is it as we speak?
Okay. A little over 2 years ago, my son had received an injury, a sports injury. The treatment was pain pills along with physical therapy. And over a course of time, not realizing as a parent, he was becoming addicted to the pain pills. And when no longer the prescriptions were available, I did not know he had the need to, still needed the pain pills. And obviously was seeking anywhere he could go to get pain pills. Probably about 6 months after he was no longer allowed to have the prescription pain pills, my child came to me one night and said, "Mom, I have an addiction problem. I need help." I immediately took him to a local hospital at the advice of his pediatrician. I will say that they were very supportive of my son. You know, they said, "We're proud of you. You've taken the first step." And I also want to say, too, the night when my son told me he had the addiction problem, he had his bags packed.
For what purpose?
Because he felt like he was going to go somewhere to get help. During the brief stay for my son in the ER room, a representative from a crisis center came in, interviewed him. The final outcome is that my child was told he did not have a problem. My son sat there and said, "Yes, I do, and I know what my body needs." And the outcome was he was sent home.
Don Mrdanovich, we've only got you for a few minutes.
Right.
I wanted you to hear that because you've expressed this concern in the past. So, wow, Don, help me out. Help Asa me.
And here it comes down to where an individual has to be an advocate for themselves. I mean, I've seen this over and over and over again. Was this in Onlsow County, Carteret County? Doesn't really matter. I mean, if you talk to the third-party payers and you talk to the people that are, hiring to put these clinics inside the hospital for crisis situations, they'll tell you that you need to file a grievance, blah, 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 but that doesn't give you any help in the here and now. I mean, if somebody's saying, "I need detox," and I need some help, now detox isn't treatment, but that's a start. And it sounds like if your son, ma'am, was sitting there in the ER saying, "Look, somebody better get me some help or something really bad's going to happen," I'm already leaning as a substance abuse professional to say, okay, maybe we need to put him in detox for a couple, 3 days. We're going to be able to medically monitor him. We're going to be able to find out if he needs residential care and all the rest of the stuff that goes along with it. But to say, "Oh, no, sorry, just your imagination, you're taking them as prescribed, have a nice day," that's, in my opinion, medical malpractice. That's somebody that's being paid to keep somebody out of the emergency room. I don't know what the funding sources is. That always muddies the waters. Who's paying for all of this stuff? If you don't have any health care insurance, okie dokie. Now somebody else, taxpayers or, some other kind of federal grant is on the hook for paying for all this stuff, because obviously the ER can't work for free.
Don, by the way, Don Mrdanovich, and I did not adequately describe who he is. He is the director of Carteret Counseling Services. Don, your comment a moment ago about the fact that he was taking action. You've got to be a self-advocate. Okay, but where is the structure to assist these people who are going to advocate for themselves, or in this case, the mother's going to advocate for the son? What structures are out there?
Well, to be honest with you, in the medical community, it's just that. When you got to put your foot down in the ER. You know, if you're not getting treated properly, you need to ask for the supervisor. You need to ask for, whoever the ward medical officer is, whoever the hospital, representative is, and say this isn't right. I mean, you got to do it in the here and now. I mean, you can't, there's no magic phone number to call up. You can't call up the governor and say, hey, the hospital in Onlsow County are being jerks.
All right, back to this issue, Mom. Okay, so you took him home. Then what?
Well, we would try various detox centers. I would make phone calls, and surprisingly, seems to be barriers. Some of the barriers are the type of drug being used, how it's being used, frequency of use, age, insurance has been issues. Another issue that my child has run into is that when he comes to the right frame of mind that says, I need help again, a representative from a crisis center will come out to our house, will interview my child, get all the information. Of course, they're being professional. I'm not blaming that person coming out to the house. And then we'll send out my child's information to various detox centers, and which could take maybe 1 to 2 days to get a response back. Well, then when you're selected to go to a certain facility, you have to be calling each morning to see if a bed's available.
Bed's available, right. Yep.
And then we also have come across, too, where the patient has to have some type of substance in their system, so when they arrive to these facilities, they have to have something a blood test showing that...
In essence, a proof or documentation that they are, in fact, addicted.
Yes, and so that's it's kind of like it has double standards there, and there again should be where... One thing I find is that, listen to the parents, listen to these kids that say they have a disease. And it was a couple months ago, there was another ER situation where I just kind of got ugly in the ER department because I said, my son has gone to a heroin addiction. And he cannot go to just a short-term facility. You've got to help out to get him to a long-term facility. And you don't get the response that that your child needs.
This is an important story, and Don, I know you've got another commitment. I'm going to let you close out this part of the conversation because I think it's something that opens the door for future conversations, Asa, because you've dealt with this as well in your capacity. As a matter of fact, quite frankly, the Sheriff's Department is the #1 detox center in the county.
That's right.
So we're going to get to this in a moment. But Don, before you leave, the fact that you've got all these barriers,
Yep.
what should a county do? What should the state do? What can we do? And let me ask you this one. Is this becoming more and more of a problem?
No, actually, it's been an ongoing problem for quite some time. And we used to have a detox in Jacksonville, and then, it didn't close. It closed down. So now the nearest detox is in Wilmington, or you can get up to Ahoskie, or you can go, and it's just there's more barriers than you can shake a stick at. And then there's, like the mom said, there's the funding stream, and there's the age. And, as I said on the first time I was on, I'm a retired military guy, and I couldn't understand in North Carolina you can actually be too drunk to go to detox. So they're going to wait for your blood alcohol concentration, and that's based on medical protocols. I didn't understand that system. I was used to the federal government system to where it is where you show up, and there you are. I mean, you're going to get help somewhere, whether you like it or not. You're going somewhere. So all of these barriers are alive and well. and there's the consumer advocacy family groups, the CFAC stuff, where people can get into it. But for, in eastern North Carolina, other than your third-party insurance, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, TRICARE, going to that provider network and saying, hey, I got a problem and I need some help. If it's state dollar self-pay Medicaid, it would be Trillium Healthcare, and I would pick up the phone and I would get a hold of Trillium Healthcare, and I would be just to make as much noise as I can possibly make, because there's gaps and needs, and they're all over. They just put out a 325-page document in Trillium that's on the website that talks about gaps and needs in North Carolina. Now, everybody thinks they need a detox in their town. The problem with that is that who's paying for it? So at the end of the day, it always comes down to who's paying for it. Well, mom doesn't want to hear that when her son's life is on the line right now in the here and now. And over at our hospital over here, there are people that are in the hospital that don't have any money, and they're waiting for a bed to get into a detox somewhere, and they're there 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. And after a while, that starts to hurt the bottom line from the hospital. So it's a big problem. It's a big problem. And then that's just the short-term stuff. Long-term, when you say, well, they need long-term residential care, some knucklehead like me is going to get in there and say, well, are you sure we can't do this in an outpatient setting? So there's medical protocols that you got to follow, and there's levels of care based on the individual's needs.
But in the meantime, we have situations such as this where basically the initial aspect of care just doesn't happen.
Right, it doesn't happen because there's no room in the inn for whatever reasons, or you got to do what mom said that she did. I mean, I hear this a lot.
All right, Don, I know you've got to go. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate that.
And feel free to share the number with mom.
I will.
And give me a call, and I can help problem solve. Maybe. I don't know.
Thanks very much, Don. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, by the way, that number for those who are listening to the program, Carter Counseling Service, 252 area code 247-1109. That's 247-1109. Asa, you've been listening to the conversation. I want to go to this very quickly before we take a break. The detox facilities, the whole issue when you're dealing with parents or family members, could be parents, could be brothers, could be sisters, could be even children,
right,
who are calling in saying, my mother, my father, my uncle has an addiction problem. You've had a situation where we've talked about this, the mother actually called you up and said, please, basically, you've got to arrest my child.
Right.
That forces your hand so that you can provide them detox, right?
Well, that's right. Well, of course, there has to be an underlying
basis
to charge someone. There's got to be a crime. You can't just call and say, well, my family member uses drugs, go out and arrest them. Most of the time,
you've got to have a charge, criminal charge.
Most of the time, that discussion is because that person is engaged in some other criminal activity, either dealing the drugs or engaging in larcenies or other criminal activity to further their addiction. And of course, most of the time, the conversation isn't from the parent to me, will you please arrest my son or daughter or family member. It's usually what can be done, and then it's usually from law enforcement coming back to, well, if your family member won't go get help on their own and cannot be successful, then sometimes using the criminal justice system may be the only recourse you have.
Assuming that a crime is caused, you can't just because I'm a user,
right?
You're not going to lock me up for that,
right? That's correct.
Something, Asa, you said just a moment ago to mom that her son came to her and said, "I've got a problem."
Right. I mean, that's when we were talking a while ago. A lot of times it's the parent or family member who looks at their loved one and says, "You have a problem." In this instance, it was the family member with the addiction who came to his mother and says, "Hey, Mom, I think I have a problem. I need some help." What I've always said is when you have somebody who realizes they have an addiction problem and they want help, you got to get them right then and try to get them some help. Because a lot of times that mindset is short-lived. Some want to go right now, but if you wait till in the morning, their addiction takes back over, and then you're kind of starting over again.
Do you agree with that?
I agree with that 100% because that has happened with my child where they have, like it could be today, Mom, I've got to get help. And then when the process starts, 2 or 3 days later, no help is coming, then the use continues on.
How do you deal with you're stable, you're calm in your conversation with us. As a mother, as a parent, but definitely as a mother, having given birth to this young man, how are you staying so calm?
I have not stayed calm. I guess maybe I'm staying calm now because finally have maybe the right people that's going to be able to, to listen and get the word out that this is a disease and these are our kids and don't be ashamed.
Do you have other children that you know of that are, other families that are dealing with the same situation?
Yes, I do.
Asa and I were talking about this earlier, and Asa this morning, you said this is the great equalizer.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
it could be Asa and Lockwood.
It could be. Well, you had mentioned this could be your grandkids, and I mentioned to you. No, this could be you. This could be me. This could be anybody. I kind of parse out people who use illegal drugs, use drugs recreationally to get high, that type of thing, and find themselves in addiction. And then you have a certain significant portion of our population who use prescription medication as medicine, never intended to be a recreational drug user, but nonetheless become dependent and then addicted. And I don't care how you get there, addiction is addiction.
Okay, and let's parse one other word. It's really not recreational at this point. It's survivability.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this is.
When people become addicted to a certain level, they're not simply using drugs just to get high to feel good. They're using drugs to feel normal,
just to get through the day,
or so that they don't feel bad. Right. And I'm not just talking about a little bit bad. I'm talking about not feeling terribly bad.
Right.
When you're going through withdrawal and that type of thing. And so it's just drug addiction, and especially depending on the type of drug that people are addicted to, especially these opioid painkillers. I mean, it's just terrible effects that go along with that.
And if I could add to that, and they suffer tremendously with the pain, with when they do try to come off the addiction themselves. You have the vomiting, you have the fever, you have the aches and pains, the joints hurt. It is a terrible disease, and it's not the high. They're not using anymore for the high. However, they've built up a tolerance, so they know that they have to use more. And that's hard to see your child in that condition.
I'm going to get back to that in a moment. Let's go to John and Stella. John, good afternoon. Thanks for your patience. Yes, sir.
Hey, no problem. I just wanted to ask the mother and Asa what their views on Suboxone are and if that avenue's been explored.
Okay. That topic actually has come up in off-air conversation, so let me go ahead with that answer. And I'm going to start with Mom. Tell me about Suboxone.
Okay. My child has never been officially prescribed Suboxone, but he has been able to get Suboxone where he purchases it from another individual that was prescribed Suboxone. And I have heard stories where those that have the legitimate prescriptions, they are only getting the prescriptions because they want to turn around and sell the Suboxone. So that's one issue that I have. Another issue is that when my son has told me that he has taken a Suboxone and he has shown me the packet, the effects that it has done to him, he looks worse than maybe him just going out and using some other type of drug. I've not seen anything good out of Suboxone.
What is Suboxone, very quickly, Asa?
Suboxone is a drug that reduces the cravings for opioids.
Okay. And what about Suboxone? Does that also become can you get an addiction to Suboxone?
Yes, it can certainly be abused, and it certainly is abused a lot, and it certainly is diverted a lot. Now, my opinion on medication-assisted treatment, whether it's using methadone or Suboxone, I'm not a teetotaler one way or the other in that regard, and I kind of feel good in my position because a good friend of mine that I was on the governor's task force with, Dr. Ashwin Patkar, he's the head of addiction medicine at Duke University. He certainly knows a lot more about this type of stuff than I do. He is an advocate for medication-assisted treatment for people who really, really cannot be successful without that additional help to help them deal with their cravings. But he's also been the first to tell me that not everyone is a proper candidate for using Suboxone and methadone to help deal with their drug addiction. So, like everything else in our society, we're always looking for a magic pill. Something's got to come in and take care of the issue. A lot of people can be successful outpatient treatment. Everybody doesn't have to go to inpatient. A lot of people can be successful without the Suboxone or the methadone in dealing with their addictions. And so it's kind of a step process. You go through these different issues, and for those who just absolutely can't be successful without it, then I think those are the folks that are more along the lines of being proper candidates for those using those other substances to help them deal with their addictions. And then again, we have the diversion aspect, which needs to be very tightly controlled, because Suboxone and certainly the methadone can be diverted, and it is diverted right here in our county, and it's being prescribed to people who need this medicine.
Okay, well, I'd just like to add that since March 10th, 2007, I've been sober, and I carried this addiction just as far as anyone can carry it. Lost everything in my life. And if you get with the right doctor and they titrate that dose and actually monitor you, Mom, there is hope.
Yeah.
It worked for me. It worked for me, and it was until I lost everything. And it was so similar, it drew chills. I actually got hurt through a wakeboarding injury when I was 18, and that's when this whole downhill spiral just started. I was hooked for many, 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 many years. And if you get with the right doctor that actually cares about your son, he will monitor it, he will check blood levels, he will get him off of it. And that's the whole thing, is finding that doctor. And as far as your son being on Suboxone and looking worse, there's something, and I'm going to let you into it, and I know Asa knows this. There are certain drugs, and I don't want to mention them on air, but they can be mixed with Suboxone and completely mimic heroin. It'll look identical to it. And also, if your son gets too high of a dose of it, he's going to look worse off. That's where the doctor comes into play.
Right.
As far as him buying the strongest one off the street and starting it, I think Suboxone gets a bad rap, and you guys are exactly right. It's being abused.
You said March 10, 2007. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Number one, let me just first say thank you for calling.
Yes.
Number two, thank you for giving Mom
some hope.
Some hope.
Yes.
I mean, this goes back to the issue, Mom. How many people like John have been out there to say you can make it through? Meaning you and your son.
Not very many, because it just seems like no one wants to share stories or say that they're currently in the same predicament as you are.
Now, John, you said you heard a few moments ago Mom say this is a disease. Your observations on that?
Absolutely right. I was predispositioned to it. I came from a family with alcoholism, and it took a lot of time in the program to admit it. But if he works at it, I've got 2 children now, my own house, a great, great job, benefits, the whole 9 yards. Your son is not out of this by any stretch, but if he works for it and you work with the right doctor, this is possible.
John, I just want to say, I don't know, I'd love to make some arrangement for Mom to get your phone number. Can I get Ross to get that for her?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to let Ross do that. This kind of makes my day.
Yep.
John, I really appreciate your call on this very much, and thank you for participating, and I'm kind of stunned. So thank you very much, John.
Thank you, John.
No problem.
All right, I'm going to put you on hold. I'm going to put you on hold, so don't go anywhere. 2 things. First, Asa Buck, Sheriff Asa Buck here in the studio. You said something Thursday evening about the impact of drugs on crime.
Yeah, well, my opinion, I think it's backed up by statistics, and I think most anybody else in law enforcement would say the same thing, that the drug abuse, drug addiction is a major driving factor behind the vast majority of our crime in our county and in our state.
Getting enough money so that they can afford to buy the drugs.
Well, getting the drugs, the types of activity that people engage in while they're on drugs. Not every person who gets out and operates an automobile and gets charged with a DWI or kills somebody in a car wreck is on alcohol. Often, about a quarter of these roughly are prescription drugs.
The governor's task force on which you were a member, or did you head it up?
Still a member. Yeah.
Did you head it up?
I was one of the co-chairs, of a particular work group.
The comment about detox facilities and concerns such as Mom has explained to us about the emergency room experience, not to be critical of emergency, just how, as Don pointed out, we don't have the structure. Is that one of the conversations in this task force?
Yeah, well, the task force presently wrapped up all of its work and presented the recommendations to the governor. And I can't say that certainly the task force covered every aspect of this problem, because there are so many facets to this problem, and a lot of it has to do with reimbursements, the way the Medicaid situation is. And I mean, you're talking about mental health. You're talking about which agencies deal with all of these various things, and expanding access to treatment. And I mean, it's just, we could sit here and talk all day about all the different avenues that create some of these roadblocks to getting treatment.
I want to go back.
A lot of it revolves around money.
I want to go back to the fact that Mom's son was injured in high school football.
Yes.
Became addicted to prescription drugs as a result.
Yes.
To Asa, my point, it could happen to us. Mm-hmm. You agree with that?
Right. Can happen to any family.
All right. Any individual.
Any individual.
Even though, because we've had one caller call in, dentist, who said he will not take prescription pain medication.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Let's go to Stephanie in Swansboro. Stephanie, thanks for your call.
I just wanted to reach out and speak to the mom and ask her, I'm a mom as well with the same situation. Are you a member of the Addicts Mom?
Is that something that's online, or have I seen that on Facebook possibly?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's a private group, and there is a chapter in every state.
Okay.
And there is a chapter in North Carolina, and we have met. Not every chapter does that, but the people that are around us, it's very helpful. It's a great support group, support without judgment, and it's also information-based, and I think that you could benefit from it.
All right, Stephanie, the name of this again is?
It's called the Addicts Mom. It is, it's a bunch of parents just like all of us.
Is it via Facebook?
Well, it's a private group on Facebook, yes, but it is a blog, and there is a website.
Okay, I'm looking at the Addicts Mom North Carolina State Chapter.
Yes, sir, and it's also on a national basis as well.
Okay.
And the chairperson and some of the other people, they go to Washington. They've been speaking to Congress about different things that, we need some help with. But I think you would find some benefit to this group.
Real quickly, Stephanie, you have children that are addicted?
Yes, sir. I have one.
Okay.
And it goes back to what Mr. Buck just said about crime and activity. And, it's not necessarily to, people don't get involved in crime because they're criminals. They get involved in crime because they're high.
Driven. They're driven and driven to it.
I'm agreeing with you on that statement, and I think that's great that you've offered this group, because you feel like there's no handbook given to parents on how to deal with this, and being able to speak to other parents would be fantastic.
It's right up there with that handbook on how to raise children.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you can find it.
Well, what does happen is when you have a child, and first of all, what people don't understand when we all talk about it could happen to us, the number one and number two ways that kids in high school get addicted to opiates is, one, having their wisdom teeth taken out, and two, is a sports-related injury. So what happened to your son is textbook for what can happen. But what you find out is, people just are very quick to voice their opinion and judge. And it's so interesting because it doesn't matter. Addiction has no discrimination. And it can show up at anybody's door at any time. It's tough. It's a tough road.
Stephanie, I'm going to ask you to hold the line. I want to see if I can arrange to talk to you some more in the future, if that would be okay.
That'd be fine.
Okay. We've come to the end of the program. We have more to tell in the story, Mom. We only got 1 or 2 segments out of it, but I think the important aspect of this, Asa, is the issue of how we can structure solutions.
Right.
I mean, one thing to point fingers and go through the details, which we're going to do in the future, but I think the important part is we've got to find solutions.
Yeah.
Stephanie, stay with me. I want to chat with you briefly off air. Thank you for calling here on Viewpoints, and to Asa Buck and to Mom. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.